games, and even more games. Some of these games have been played, some other games remained unfinished, and some of these games make up a substantial list that remain not just unplayed, but due to the habits of the modern gamer, will likely never be played. And these are what I like to be called a backlog. The backlog can get especially extensive on PC, where the advent of the occasional Steam or GOG sale, or even an affordable Humble Bundle, has made it particularly easy to develop a backlog of titles that realistically you might never play. That's of course not to say that the quality of these titles are lacking in some regard, but typically for one reason or another, these are games that the ideal enjoyer would give a chance, but let's be real, gang. The second that other title, which is highly anticipated, comes out, you're going to play that instead. Or you might just never be in the mood to rectify this disgusting testament to money spent. Which finally brings us to the new series that I want to introduce, which I'm going to call Backlog'd. The series where we take a look at the games in my backlog that should be played, but for one reason or another, I've never had the chance to play. And taking a look at my backlog, I got about 60 games or so as of this video. Now, of course, if you go and actually look at my Steam, there are more than 60 titles in my backlog that have few or no hours, but for the purposes of this series, we're taking a look at specifically at games that I have never played before, or a game with such a little amount of time that I have put into it that it requires a proper playthrough. Titles can range from RPG to multiplayer focused shooters to just weirdo adventure games that I just acquired a long time ago. But you might be asking, what makes this series different from the impressions, reviews, and retrospectives? And I would say that the main gimmick of this series is almost what I would call impressions version of a retrospective, if that makes any sense. I mean that in the sense that these are not new games, so they don't warrant a review or, an impressions video, but they aren't games that I've played before and have had a variety of different thoughts with them for ages. So with this new series, we'll be taking a look at not so new stuff in my backlog and giving a bit of context of how I got in there. So of course, the first game that we're going to talk about in this brand new series is Stray Gods, a role-playing musical developed by the fellas over at Summerfall Interactive in Australia. Though to be honest, they're kind of like a team that goes all over the place. For such an occasion, we got today a non-stop energy drink, Stalker Edition, all the way from Ukraine that I saw at the store because I don't got any booze right now. Don't know if it's any good, but hey, we're gonna open it up. Oh! Cheers, gang. Radioactive apple. Not too bad. In Stray Gods, you play the role of Grace, a member of a local band that seemingly has lost its spark, and looking for something more in life, which ironically is exactly what Grace gets with the arrival of Calliope. Calliope and Grace have a short musical number that introduces some weird elements to reality. The lights dim, the world fades out, and you're left in a world where only the two gals can remain to sing their pipes out, leaving Grace puzzled by the experience when Calliope leaves to potentially be met again. Well, that again comes very quickly when Calliope stumbles into Grace's apartment, bleeding from a wound that she had received, and with barely any time to relay what is going on, she transfers a ball of energy into Grace and perspires, only for someone who calls themselves Hermes to show up at her door and throws Grace into the Viper's Nest, no pun intended. With a chance meeting with Athena, Aphrodite, Persephone, and Apollo, it is revealed to Grace that the Greek gods of old, known as idols, are real and walking amongst the mortals, and that Grace has taken the Eidolon of Calliope, which transfers her essence to her and allows her to use her abilities as an idol. Using these abilities will come in handy because Grace has been accused of murdering Calliope to take her powers from her, and she will only have a single week to get to the bottom of this murder mystery to reveal the true killer and save Grace from the execution that suspends over her like a sword of Damocles. Once again, no pun intended. So, with only a week to spare, Grace has to use her newfound abilities fitted for a muse, her friends, whether it be from the ranks of the mortals or some new companions amongst the idols, and her charm, her wit, or her fury to be able to get to the bottom of this mystery. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of Stray Gods, we gotta talk about how this game made it onto the list to begin with, and that has to do with its creative director, David Gaider, or Gaider, sorry. David Gaider might not seem like a household name, especially with the pantheon of other game directors that are out there, no pun intended, but if you scrape the surface of his career, you will see that he has been a lead writer at BioWare for so many years and has done so much great work on my favorite RPGs, main one being the lead writer and sort of a lore master for the Dragon Age games. And to be honest, gang, I'm typically the sort of person that when someone leaves a studio that I enjoy or assume to do some sort of side project, I like to see what they have done or what they're going to do with the newfound freedom of being away from this larger studio. In this case, Gaider opting for a smaller scale narrative focused adventure to show the world his storytelling chops, and I have to say that, for the most part, he's achieved it. Though I have to say, fellas, that an element that I was pleasantly surprised to discover is the rather star-studded cast of all the different idols, which range from Grace being voiced by the incredible Laura Bailey, Apollo by Troy Baker, and probably my favorite performance in just about anything she's in is with Persephone, played by the legendary Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who is known for playing Claudia Wolf in Silent Hill 3 and doing pretty much most of the vocal tracks that Akira Yamaoka does in his soundtracks. You would initially think that for a smaller project such as Stray Gods that there wouldn't be a huge budget for all these incredible voice actors, but it's nice to see that in one of the aspects that matter the most, they didn't skimp out and hired some fantastic talent. So with that, gang, I think it's finally that we talk about Stray Gods and see if this game is going to make me want to kill myself and go through the river Styx, or perhaps maybe at the end of this I might be a good aficionado of the Lady Medusa, i.e. maybe this game might make me rock hard. Now fellas, I'll be real in saying that the gameplay is probably going to be the shortest part of this video because for the most part the game is pretty straightforward since it plays a lot like a visual novel with some light role-playing elements. This means that you'll be watching the story unfold as Grace goes around the different idols to figure out more about the mystery surrounding the death of Calliope, but every so often you'll come across some choices that can be made in the story. A lot of these choices can come about from the 3 different personalities that Grace can choose from at the beginning, ranging from charming, rebellious, or cunning, which in turn affect not just the sort of things that Grace can say, but also the tone that she has during the musical elements. This can range from Grace that is a lot more empathetic and kind, looking to get the idols on her side using her charms, or being more perceptive of the circles of people around her, only to strike someone out as they get caught on a lie, or you could just say to hell with it all and throw caution to the wind to have a punk-like defiant Grace that confronts others head on. Though the culmination of these aspects will come from the musical sequences where Grace will use her power as the last muse to get everyone to start singing, leading to finding the truth at the bottom of everyone's heart and where the bulk of the decisions will be made. These decisions are usually reflected in the different personalities that you can choose from, and in turn they will affect how Grace sings her song in these precious moments, with the music ranging from something more soft and empathetic or defiant and confrontational, leading to massive crescendos of emotion. And while I will talk about the qualities of these sequences a bit later, I will say that apart from that, there's not a whole lot more to talk about with the gameplay. There's some light replay value in being able to go through the game again to see some of the other paths that you can choose or try out some of the different personalities that can change the dialogue, but for the most part, this is what you're going to experience. Personally, while I am fond of visual novels, there are typically more puzzle or problem-solving elements that they introduce to keep you on your toes both as you are playing and in a narrative sense, and while it doesn't feel like I would detract from the game for its absence, I can see a world where there are a lot more avenues to solve the mystery in a way that satisfies that point-and-click adventure game part of my lizard brain. Yeah, so basically at the end of it, there isn't a whole lot for the gameplay, and it's really just there as an avenue for you to get into the narrative and figure out what's going on. And so with that, hey, let's talk about the narrative and see what all these old gods get themselves up to. Now, Stray Gods isn't going to win any damn awards, but what I particularly enjoy is not just the reinterpreting of the Greek mythos, but spinning its characters in ways that I found interesting. The base idea of the idols is that these gods aren't truly immortal in the way that we think, but that they tend to inspire successors that will eventually transfer their eidolons to, which is the very soul of the god that gives the individual not just their power, but eventually their combined memories of all prior iterations. Many times how the different gods transfer their Eidolon makes for interesting storytelling, such as how Persephone was once a gangster who transferred her Eidolon to her paramour and is now running a club known as the Underworld. Great interest can also be found in unraveling the events of the past and how the idols deal with them, in particular when it comes to Aphrodite and her persecution under the mortals, but I'll kind of leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the whole thing. It's discovering the hidden histories mixed with the modern intrigues with a lot of the side characters that gives Stray Gods some of its genuine charm. I especially loved a certain scene where you get to play matchmaker with Asterion, the Minotaur of the Labyrinth that, depending on how the choices is made, can lead to really thought-provoking circumstances. Though most of the decisions that will be made will come from the musical sequences that typically are sort of a climax of a character's arc. It can be something as simple as deciding between two friends who's going to have your back, or trying to figure whether an idol's forced passing of the Eidolon, which to us mortal constitutes as suicide, is an appropriate manner to deal with trauma. Amongst the cast of characters, there are a few that I particularly really enjoy. First one is our wonderful Grace, that approaches all the situations with a bit of wit and charm that is befitting of a gal who must feel like a fish out of water amongst all the gods of ancient Greece. One of the other characters that I really dig, as you can probably tell, is Persephone, who has so much baggage that has to do with the old world and prior events dealing with the other idols and how they should go about doing things in the modern age that makes her some of the most interesting of the idols. Though if I had to make a criticism of the narrative, is that while I think they do a really good job with the overall plot, it feels as though as when the game gets really damn good and starts to get going, a lot of the plot reveals are happening and characters are showing their true colors, it just kind of sort of abruptly ends. That's not to say that the plot was bad, quite the opposite actually. More so that it left me wanting more, since the whole experience was relatively short, but it's an enjoyable playthrough for a weekend in my opinion. So now that we got the narrative out of the way, we gotta push that over to the side and we're gonna talk about the presentation of Stray Gods, which, with a lot of how this game is, there's some things that are really great and some things that are a little bit left to be desired. Initially, I described Stray Gods as a sort of visual novel, but to be more precise, I would probably say that it teeters closer to a motion comic in the way that all the quote-unquote sprites show up and how the scenes are almost paneled like a comic. That is even to say that Stray Gods is a bit more cinematic than 90% of the gameplay of a visual novel of just looking at different sprites and eventually waiting for a CG. Most of the sprites I would say are pretty decent, with the standout ones being Grace, Freddy, or even Persephone and Apollo, with the amount of different sprites that they have and how dynamic they tend to look. But for every Grace or Freddy, we have an Asterion or Aphrodite that have some sort of flatness to their sprite that it even makes it seem like they're coming from completely different games. I don't really know how to describe it, but the quality of some of the sprites can be all over the place, and the ones that don't look so well just come off as a bit kinda cheap. I can understand it since the amount of times that some of these characters show up can be really limited, but then you have some other sprites like a pair that I don't want to spoil that look way better, but they're in the game for barely one scene. On top of that, a lot of the backgrounds can seem incredibly basic and kinda shallow, with only locations with a more mythical element seeming interesting and visually appealing to look at. Though, if I had to be honest, the art for the locations fulfill the purposes required, which is just a showcase of the scene, so it's nothing too bad or egregious. Now, one area that tends to look incredible just about every time is the musical sequences where the stage will be literally set. The aspect ratio changes to one that is a lot more cinematic, and the visuals end up becoming a lot more dynamic, what with all the different characters singing and opening their hearts to the music. Now with the visuals out of the way, it's time to talk about the more musical elements of this musical. It should be of no surprise that the biggest draw for Stray Gods is having an illustrious voice cast all coming together to sing their hearts out, and for the most part, the spotlight on this little musical is warranted. Usually near the end of chapters or big event set pieces will warrant a musical number that has Grace using her powers to get everyone to open their hearts and sing the truth. It could be something as simple as having her friend Freddy and Pan sing out their concerns for Grace to decide what's best for everyone, or in convincing a despondent Persephone to actually help you out. And I would have to say in general that most of the songs do end up hitting their mark and are genuinely pleasing to hear, though there are a few gripes that I have with the technical aspects of the sound design. I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on with the sound of Stray Gods that to me comes off as rather sloppy, especially for a game that is so heavily centered around musical numbers. To give an example, it seems that the mixing for the audio is just kind of all over the place, with no two characters, even in conversation, feeling like they're speaking at the same audio levels. Some are much more soft and some come out more clearly, and it makes me wonder if perhaps the game was all recorded in studio or done remotely via home studio setups, which might actually explain it quite a bit. Though, for the most part, in the musical numbers, it seems to be all sounding at the proper levels. So there's no setting your volume higher since you can barely hear Calliope, only for Pan to come in a moment later and then blow your eardrums out. If there is one thing that I will say about the musical numbers is that while the subject matter and the writing can be really interesting, there are quite a few numbers that are a bit lackluster in the musical element. It's almost as if the heart is there, but you just wish that the music could be a bit better so it could give it that bombasticness that Stray Gods deserves. Like hell, I got to the final musical number in the game and was thinking to myself like, damn, this feels like a big ass climax to this saga. But this so-so musical number? Really? That's it? And it kind of hit me by surprise because the other musical numbers along the way are just getting the chance to talk to someone or playing matchmaker were way better and much more memorable. But these are all things that can be improved in whatever projects that Summerfall does next. That being said, as a first go about for a new studio, I honestly think they did a good job. These are honestly just kind of minor gripes. And that's pretty much all I gotta say about Stray Gods, a role-playing musical by Summerfall Interactive. And man, oh man, it was a pretty good game. You know, it's a little mixed in some areas, but I think it has a really cool premise, and it's a really novel idea that I think could be used for other games and other mythologies. Summerfall Studios has a flawed but otherwise pretty decent game on their hands here, and in an environment where there are new studios coming out, releasing a game and then closing, or not even getting to see that first game, it's nice to see that they've made it this far to create a unique product and they're still surviving. It's also nice to see that David Gaider still has his writing chops and that through Stray Gods, I've come to appreciate more of his work on Dragon Age games in writing believable human characters that are interesting to learn about and interact with regardless of whichever walk of life they come from. Which leads me to say that if you are the sort of person to take issue to the disclaimer at the beginning of the game, then I would probably not recommend Stray Gods for you, since the game has narratives and themes that I would say were just not for you. Let's just put it that way. But for those looking for a nice little musical visual novel sort of adventure game, whatever the hell, where you hang around a bunch of Greek gods trying to solve a murder mystery with some light replay value, then I would recommend that you pick up Stray Gods and give it a try. The gang over at Summerfall Interactive would certainly appreciate it. Stray Gods can be found on all major systems and be bought for the price of 40 Canadian dollars or about 30 euros, though I have seen it go on sale quite often, so you can even pick it up for cheaper. So there we got it, gang. This is the first of many games on my backlog that we have logged. And so with that, for the first time, let's take a look what we got logged. Damn, only the one game? Well, you gotta start somewhere, so we got one game down and probably around, I don't know, maybe 60 or so more to go. But regardless, for all the fellas that made it all the way out here to this part of the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate each and every single one of your views. And if you're new here, hey, welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like this video, hey, check out my other stuff, and if you like that, maybe subscribe. That would be pretty damn cool. Just saying. It's pretty interesting to see like where other developers end up going after they get out of these big studios. In this case with David Gaider after BioWare, and it's nice to see that even then he's still doing a lot of good work. So with that, I gotta give out a shout out to Esteban or Tavan, my good old friend out there. If you're watching this, cheers, buddy. Thanks for the key for this video. You would have absolutely hated it, so I'm pretty glad that you sent it to me and I got to make this cool video out of it. So, and with that, gang, I think we're starting to feel the end of my life, if not the end of this video. So I think it's time for me to transfer my Eidolon. So with that, fellas, this is Tom the Chosen One going out to transfer my Eidolon to one of the neighborhood crackheads, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey, take it easy.